Hello everyone, this is Fusion here, just doing another video for the Pickems for the Legends stage. I can show you guys here how we did on the previous stage. So we got our 5 correct in the Pick'em predictions for the Challenger stage and whatnot. So next step is to get place our Pickems for the Legends stage. Our goal is to get 5 of them correct for this Legends stage to see if we can get ourselves a diamond coined. And just to kind of show you all how the last stage went, I picked EG Rio. That was a terrible pick. I picked IHC 03. That was almost correct until 00 Nation decided they didn't want to win games. And then looking at the bottom, this actually I did get 6 out of 7 correct, but in all honesty, it could have gone very wrong on the last day. In theory, I guess. I mean, I think it was pretty safe to say Cloud9 and Fnatic were going to win their games. And then Vitality OG didn't matter to me. Either one winning would have been fine, at least in terms of pick'ems. But I think overall did pretty well in the pick'ems. Got 6 out of 7 right at the bottom, and the 3-0 and the 0-3 are always difficult to get. You're just kind of hoping you can get it in the end, right? Overall, I'm not really going to talk about my thoughts on these teams and how they all performed and whatnot, but I will obviously make a video for EG this weekend, or at least I'll try to. I have a very important exam coming up on Tuesday, so I don't really know um, if I'm going to be able to do it, but we'll try my best. I will try my best to get that video out. But regardless, let's move on. We're going to talk about the legend stage. And yeah, this is actually, I'm not going to lie. The first time I looked at this, I thought this was going to be super difficult. But the more I think about it, I guess here's why. It's difficult because there's a lot of good teams here, sure, but I think the real reason why this is a difficult stage to predict is because so many of these top teams could just fall apart or could get upset in a ridiculous way and not make it to the playoffs. Teams that you expect to make it may not make it. I think the only two exceptions are probably FaZe and Navi. Those are the only two teams that honestly I feel like super confident are going to make it to playoffs. A lot of these other teams, you can see a world where things go wrong and they don't make it. So I think overall, that's why the stage is difficult. It's not really because there's so many good teams, as much as it is. I think there's just that the best teams aren't actually that much farther ahead compared to everybody else. Or not. That's not exactly true. It's not really that. It's more so that uh, they have flaws in their game that you can definitely see where they may not make it to the playoffs, even though they really should, based on how good they are. But you can see how some of these teams could just fall apart. I guess what we'll do is we'll start with the 0-3 pick as we typically do. And so I think the teams that are in contention for the 0-3 pick, I think they're pretty clear cut. You've got Sprout. I think they could be a 0-3 team. I think Mouse could be a 0-3 team. BNE could be a 0-3 team. Big can be a 0-3 team. I don't see any of these other teams being 0-3. But I think those are the obvious picks for 0-3. So kind of, I guess, to break that down a little bit more, you know, Sprout has looked pretty decent, or at least they look decent in the RMR. They actually have some pretty good players. They're pretty underrated. They're a surprising team. They're actually typically when you see Sprout, you don't really think that they're going to do anything, but they have actually like got a pretty decent roster with some actual like young talent on their team that's quite good. And so you can definitely see a world where they might get a win. So, but I'd have to say they're definitely in the lower echelon, the lower tier, the lowest tier of team at this stage. Along with some other teams, and but you know what, they're a decent team. I could definitely see a world where they get a win or maybe two in the best of ones, but I don't know that they're really going to get anywhere in best of threes. I just don't know if they have that ability to do that. Obviously, I don't really think they're going to make it to the playoffs or anything. But in terms of the 0-3 pick, they might be a team that, like, yeah, I'm not really super confident that they're going to go 0-3, but I think they're still in the category, right? Mouse looked really good in the first stage. they especially Exertion, and I do think Exertion is a extremely talented player, and I think he's going to in years to come he could definitely be a powerhouse name. But I think it's just Mal's just looked really much better than they've shown previously. They looked really good in the first stage, and I just don't see that level of performance continuing here. I just think the teams are too good at this point. Uh, the teams are just too good at this point to where I could be like, yeah, Mouse could totally, slip into the playoffs, maybe, go to the quarterfinal, or they might get 2 wins. They could be in the 2-2 game. I mean, I think if they do get into the 2-2 game, it would be because they played easy opponents, or because they won their best of ones or something like that. I don't really see this team doing too much. But I will acknowledge they have played well so far to get to where they're at. I just think this is the last stage for them. They're not going to get any farther than this. BNE BNE is a weird team. They are not a good team. In all honesty. But what they're good at, they're really good at CT side, and it's not just that they're really good at CT side; they're unbelievably dominant on CT side. They will rack up 13 rounds on any map on a CT side, and you're just like, yeah, it's just typical B&E. They are ridiculous on their CT sides. Their T sides are terrible. Their T sides are not very good, but their CT sides are insane. They just rack up rounds on their CT sides. Yeah, and they have talent. It's not that they don't have talent. It's just that they're not a very strategic team. They are pretty much like if you can shut them down on their CT side, you will win the game. That's pretty much they're the most one-dimensional team probably in this entire stage. In that regard. And so I do not rate Bad News Eagles very highly. I don't think they're that good of a team. I personally I think I'm going to put them in my 0-3. But what I will acknowledge is in the best of ones, they can definitely have a super strong CT side and just win a best of one. I can totally see that happening. In fact, it probably will happen. I just think that this is by far and away the worst team at this stage, personally, because their T sides are so atrocious. So that's kind of where I stand on B&E. Big, I put them as a flyer in the last stage. I put them as a team just because they're so structurally sound. I put them in to go through because I just thought that the other teams wouldn't be able to compete with the level of structure Big has. At this point in the Legend stage, that is no longer an advantage. Big, while they are a fundamentally sound team, and while you typically would have them as an upset team in most matchups, they're usually a good upset team. Unfortunately, with the whole Sin having to stand in and everything, I just don't see this team having enough firepower. Searson isn't a consistent opper, especially when the pressure gets mounted more and more. I don't care what he says in interviews. Quite the results are what matters. I like that he has that mentality, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't show up in the results, then you were all talk to begin with. So I like Big. I think Big is one of honestly, they're one of my favorite teams because they are such a structurally sound team and they play Counter Strike the right way. But unfortunately, I just think the other teams here are just too strong for them to really be able to do too much. And they definitely could just get outclassed from a firepower perspective and just go 0-3. It could totally happen. Um, I think like I said, I think out of all these teams, I'm going to pick Bag News Eagles as my 0-3. I just think their cheat sides are so atrocious. They won't be able, and their CT sides, while their CT sides are very good, their CT sides were dominant. In the last stage, playing against teams that quite clearly are not that good. At this stage, you're not going to have a mega CT side against a team Spirit or an NIP. I feel like those teams are too talented to just get rolled over by a CT side like that. I mean, maybe they will, but I would like to hope that because B&E's T side is so atrocious that a good enough team will just beat them. So I'm going to put them as my 0-3. We'll get to the 3-0 at the end, because obviously I want to get through what are my teams that are going to be locks to advance. And then we'll get into kind of what the gamble pick is going to be. I haven't actually looked at the matchups coming into tomorrow because I'm doing this video pretty late. Like I said, I've been studying for an exam that is coming up, so I will pull up the matchups. That way, I can kind of. That's typically how I like to predict my 3-0. You know, but let's first start off with the locks. FaZe is the lock. They're the best team at the event. Navi a very close second. I know they've looked shaky, but they just have too much firepower at this point, and you just can't count them out, especially in this stage. Like they're just gonna dominate. I feel. Um, if you weren't trying to go for a flyer 3-0, I feel like Navi 3-0 is a pretty safe one. They're a team that just got so much firepower. It's incredible. Probably more firepower than FaZe. It's just that FaZe is a better team, or at least they've been the better team throughout this entire year. They've been winning that head-to-head quite consistently, even though the games have been close. So I think those two are the easy locks, but this is actually where it kind of gets a little difficult because the other teams that you would typically have in here as locks, it's not quite as clear. Um, I think the three teams that instantly come to mind are Team Liquid, Team Vitality, and Cloud9. I think those are the three obvious teams that would go next. And I still am going to have them going through, but I typically like to put this in the order that I think, like from left side, far left being like the favorite, to the bottom right being the least favorite. I think out of this entire thing, I think you just have to go with Vitality. Yeah, they struggled, but you know what? I think Vitality is, they're a good enough team to make it through this stage. I think they're still one of the top five teams, top three team in the world. I think they're better than the rest than Team Liquid and Cloud9. They have that veteran pedigree. They have that experience on LAN. They have multiple major champions in Device, or I'm sorry, not Device, Dupree and Magisk. They have Zonic as a coach. I just think Apex is super experienced. He's won a major. I just think they're probably the third best team at this event. Yeah, they struggled in the first stage, but I mean, a lot of teams struggled in the first stage. And I don't really take that into consideration. I don't put too much weight on that because they looked good in the best of threes. I'm not really too worried about that. Um, I think the next best team, I think a lot of people would probably say is Liquid. I'm gonna put Cloud9. Um, I think Cloud9's a better team than Liquid. Um, Cloud9 and also another team that struggled, but when they went to the best of threes, they didn't drop a map. Shiro looked like the best player. Well, he is at this point the best player at the event. Axile has been slow to start, but I think Axile is a mega talented player who I would like to think he's going to pick it up moving forward. Inters, I mean, can you find a better support player than this guy at this point? I mean, the dude is just unbelievable as he basically is like the perfecto for this team, and he does it arguably just as good as he does. So he is just he's an underrated piece on this team that doesn't get talked about, but I think he's vastly important. The only player on this team that you can really say anything bad about is probably Nafany, um, in the sense that at times it's questionable as to whether or not he's able to rally the troops to get them to do what they need to do, to get them to be the best version of themselves at all times. It seems like they struggle with consistency a little bit, but overall, this team is just, for me, they're just too good not to put them here, and I think they're a better team than Liquid when they're performing the way they should. And I think they will perform just fine. I think maybe that wake up call against Imperial. I think that was a turning point for Cloud9. I do. I think that, even narratively that's a turning point in the sense that the last time that Imperial faced Cloud9 in an elimination match in a major, Imperial got the best of them. So I think the fact that Cloud9 won that and then they won the rest of their matches they played, they didn't drop a map, even if some of the games were close. I think this is a turning point for Cloud9. I think you're going to start to see them fire on all cylinders, and maybe they needed that challenger stage to kind of heat up into the tournament. So I think Cloud9 is a good team. I think Team Liquid is probably the next team you have to mention, but I do think personally I don't rate their EPL performance that highly in the sense that they really only beat Cloud9 to get to where they got. They did not have to play many tough teams. If you don't remember at EPL, they had to play Fnatic and Mouse because Mouse ended up doing well in EPL group stage, and they ended up going into I guess it would be the quarterfinal spot for that event because there was a round of, what is it, 16 or whatever. Um, so, you know, uh, so Liquid got a pretty easy route to the final. They really only had to beat Cloud9 to get there. Cloud9, a team that notoriously chokes in big matchups, unfortunately. and Team Liquid ended up beating them there in a close series, a very close series. And then Team Liquid ended up playing Vitality and losing in the final. So, I just don't really rate. I just don't really rate Team Liquid's EPL run all that great. They looked shaky against Evil Geniuses in the RMR, and if this major showed anything, it showed that EG's not that good. And then, I don't know. The consistency is a little bit of what I worry about with Team Liquid, and I haven't seen Elige hit the levels that I wanted to see him at. In the sense of now that Yukindar is the first guy going in, you just expect Elige to just really find some of that like incredible form that we're used to seeing, and sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And so I want to see a little bit more from that. But like in terms of talent, this team is incredible. It's just, and I do think they're a top five team at this event. I just think I don't know that I would put them over a Cloud9 or a Vitality at this point. um, so anyways, moving on, this is where things get tough in terms of who are you going to put in the last couple of spots. I'm going to go with outsiders. I've been a big believer in outsiders. Honestly, the past couple of events, I think they're definitely like everyone hates them, and I understand why. They're not a fun team to watch. They save all the time. They play the percentages. They save a lot. The games go by so painfully slow because they take 15-15 every game, and it always goes to overtime or close to it. And you look at the roster and you don't really see much. I mean, Fame's good, Flit's good, James he's a good IGL, but Opping leaves some things to be desired at times in terms of his aggressiveness. And then you look at Norbert and you're just like, okay, I guess he's a player on the roster. You know what I mean? And Quicker, yeah, he's all right. He's a veteran, sure, but you don't see anything that like makes you go like, oh, this team's super exciting. Like there really isn't anything like that on this team other than maybe Fame, and Flit to some degree. But so you just always remember that they don't have Yakundar anymore, and you just don't think this team's going to do anything. And then every time you count them out, they make every close game, they win them. They always seem to make it deep into tournaments. No matter how bad people think they are, this is just like the zombie team. Outsiders, their logo, ironically, does it is such a terrible logo. Like I think it's supposed to be like a sloth or something, but it does look so freakishly weird. They are the zombies of the scene. Like this team just does not die. It does not matter what you do to this team, they just don't die. And they're typically the benchmark for if you can beat them in a best of three, you're a good team. And so I think they're gonna make it. I think they're gonna make it into the playoffs. I think they'll be a quarterfinal team. They're just so hard to put away. And I could be wrong. That's why they're in the bottom three. I think these bottom, and I say bottom three because I'm talking about these last two spots here as well as the 3-0 pick. And Outsiders is definitely a team that I could see going through. They've looked decent. They've looked pretty good. They win all the close games, like I said, and they're just so difficult to put away. And I just don't know that some of these teams are going to have the tenacity to put them away fast enough. And if you give outsiders too many opportunities, they will win. So I'm going to put them as my, what is that, sixth slot. So moving on to the seventh slot, this is where things become quite tricky, actually. And this is where we're actually going to take a look at the matchups because I want to see. So the teams we're going to be looking at here are NIP, ENCE, Heroic. Damn, it's tough. I want to put Spirit in the conversation, but I don't really know. And then maybe like a Furia and Fnatic, but honestly, those two teams aren't inspiring me with a whole lot of confidence as of recent. But let's kind of look at these matchups. Let's start with we'll go from right to left because I think NIP is probably the one that I'm high on the most. Um, so let's start with Fnatic. Fnatic is playing NIP in the first round. I think that's a tough matchup. I think Fnatic is a okay team. I just don't think they're like. I just don't know if they're good enough to make the playoffs. Is the problem? I just don't know that they're good enough. And maybe if they had an easy first round matchup, but NIP is a better team than Fnatic, I think, at this point. And that's kind of crazy to say because this Fnatic roster has been around longer than the NIP roster with Alexi B. But I really rate this Alexi B NIP lineup quite highly. And I'll get to reasons why in a moment. But I just don't know. I don't know that I see Fnatic getting through. Furia's got a game against ENCE, unfortunately. Heroic's playing outsiders. None of these are going to be good, dude. These 3-0 picks are difficult, man. Um, yeah, this is tough, dude. This is really, really tough because I'm not gonna lie. If any of these teams had had like an easier matchup, I would have been favored to be like, yeah, fuck it, we'll put them in the 3-0 pick. Because the problem is, I really don't like picking teams to go 3-0 that have a really difficult first round matchup because it just feels hopeless. It feels like super difficult that you're going to get the prediction right. And I want to have the best chance at that. But okay, let's get this last spot. Now that I know that all these teams right are going to have difficult matchups, which team do I really think is the best team out of all of them to make it into this last spot? I think honestly, I honestly think it's NIP. I think NIP is really good. I really like Alexi B. I've always liked Alexi B. I always thought he did really good things on that OG roster, and that he got them to be. I mean, I think at one point OG was a top five team in the world in the HLTV rankings like last year. Um, they never should have been ranked that high. And I'm talking like it was like right before the major, the Stockholm major, I think, but they hadn't qualified. Obviously, they didn't qualify, but I think they were at the time close to the top five. That's pretty incredible when you look at the roster they had. And the fact that Flames, presumably, I mean, it sounds like now from his interviews, he wasn't really putting in that much of, he wasn't putting in the full effort. Like, LXCB did wonders on that team. He did great with Ents as well. Yeah, he went to G2, but I personally don't feel like they really gave LXCB too much of a shot. They kind of gave up on him quick. At least Xtaz looks like he did. And maybe that team just wasn't right for him, right? It happens. And I think with this NIP roster in particular, not only did they look so good in the major qualifier, but on top of that, I think these are the kind of players that I think will buy into his system. Alexi B seems like he's a very strategic, very intricate in-game leader where he likes to have really in-depth strats. He wants things to be done a certain way, and I think I've listened to some of the videos of the players talking about LXCB joining the team, and it sounds like they wanted structure within the team, and that is exactly what LXCB is going to do. He is going to bring structure to this team. And the only thing that I don't like about the NIP roster as of right now is that Rez is opping. I understand it's really the only thing they can do unless they make Esatag the opper and go back to Rez being a rifler. But then you have the obvious problem of you have too many star riflers, right? You've got Brolin that you want to cater to, you got Hampus now, and you have Rez. And so one of them has to be a support player. So I understand Esatag is probably the best support option. Rez is not a bad opper. He can't be the long-term solution for the team. Personally, as much as people are going to gaslight you into saying that Rez can be a top 5, 10 opper in the world, that's not going to happen, okay? So, I just don't think Rez is that caliber of an opera. I think he's a much better rifler, but I understand why they're doing what they're doing. And they didn't have time to address this issue. I think overall this team is really sick. I personally rated Hampus super highly once I knew he was going to go from in-game leading to just being a rifler. People were not high on this guy being just a rifler. I think that's just coming from the stigma that in-game leaders are not typically good fraggers, and so people just immediately put that label onto Hampus. But that was definitely not the case, and you could tell just from watching Hampus. Hampus seems like the kind of person where, like, NIP, you guys got to remember, NIP was not a very good T-sided team when Hampus was IGLing. In fact, they were so bad at T-side, it was like almost guaranteed they just didn't get many rounds on their T-sides. You could count on it. Hampus Hampus always performs well. He always performed well on the team, and I think that it's very similar to the blame F. I literally think he is the blame F of Sweden. He is the guy where you take him off the in-game leader role, you put him in his own lurker position, let him do what he wants, let him see the information he's seeing and relay that, and he can be a secondary caller on the team, right? Maybe he controls some of the CT sides, but he can, as on T side, he can relay his information extremely well. He can have even more impact now that he's not having to worry about in-game leading. He can focus on himself a little bit more. He can, if Alexi is struggling with anything, he can give him ideas. Like, I think this is a perfect fit for Alexi B, which is crazy because I never would have thought this would have worked. But it honestly, it just seems like it's just fitting so well. So I really think NIP is going to be good. I think they even could upset some of these other teams I have ranked above them. The only problem is with sample size, I just can't put them higher than these other teams. So I'm putting them in though. I think they're gonna make. I think they're gonna surprise people. I think they're gonna make playoffs. They might even make the semifinal. They could upset somebody in the quarters. A lot of people got I can't speak. What you got to remember too is there's not a lot of data on NIP right now. And so that's really going to be an advantage for them moving into the legend stage, especially that they're in the legend stage and they didn't have to play in the challenger stage. There's not many people that know what NIP is bringing to the table. And Hampus is a freaking god, and Brolin, yeah, you know what? Brolin is a star rifler, obviously. I want to see a little more from him, but he's a damn good rifler. And Rez can be he's a good enough opper where he can get you by, playing against other decent teams, And Esotag is literally the support player. I mean, he is the Swiss Army knife of the team, and he just fits any role you need. So I just think this roster is really well constructed, minus the res issue. But I think this is a great lineup that's going to do good things. So I'm going to put them as making it through as my last team. As for the 3-0 pick, I was looking at the games. Frankly, look, man, I'd love to put like a Furia, a Fnatic, a Heroic, for example. I think Heroic is a decent shout. I'm I would want to pick Heroic. My only problem with picking Heroic is they're playing Outsiders, which is just a team that is so hard to beat. And I don't know, man. That is a tough call. Um, and I know it sounds bad to only do this off of the first round, but in my opinion, if you already are getting a really difficult matchup in the first round, it's going to be tough for me to want to pick you. And ideally, what you want is a team that's on the brink, like a NIP, a Heroic. Like if Heroic had an easier first round matchup, I'd be definitely picking them probably. But because they're playing Outsiders, and Outsiders is such a just nightmare of a team to put away, um, I just I don't know, man. Looking at these games, man, Spirit is playing BNE, and I'm not gonna lie, I like that. I think Spirit's gonna beat that B&E team pretty good. I say this, B&E will probably have a monster CT half and destroy Spirit somehow, but I actually think Spirit's pretty good. I think Patsy's really sick. Wonderful. I've been watching Wonderful for a little bit now, even before he was on the main Spirit roster, and I've always liked him as a player. I think he's got a lot of potential. Magix is one of those hit or miss players. He either has a game where he's just looks like one of the crispiest riflers in the world, and he'll have another game where he's just like kind of middle of the pack, whatever. Um, and then Chopper, he's not the best in-game leader in the world, but you know what? Whatever. When you have the firepower that Spirit does, it's not the worst thing in the world. Um, I don't know. I like this team. I think they're pretty solid. In all honesty, I think they could definitely be one of those teams that just gets hot and just makes it through the whole thing, no problem. They've always been a team that's kind of like that. They did have a big run at the last major. I'm not really taking that into account, but worth mentioning. And yeah, I don't know. I think actually I'm gonna go with Spirit, just because I actually think Spirit has an easier first round matchup. I can definitely see a world where Spirit just gets hot and just starts taking over. And just their individuals are firing on the first day. They start up 2-0, and all of a sudden they're playing a best of three. It could happen, and who knows, right? Who knows? Again, I think the only other team that I would put as maybe like I want to put this team is Heroic. I do think Heroic would be the next team to mention if I could name one more team, it would probably be Heroic. I just don't think they've really looked all that good recently. The Jabby integration hasn't been the best thing in the world. I have questions about Cadian's consistency. Well, I mean, I think everyone has questions about his consistency as an opper. Even though he seems to be a good leader of men, seems to be a good, um, in-game leader. Sometimes he really does. He really is like a good in-game leader. It's just sometimes the opping leaves something to be desired. And I think this roster would genuinely be much better if they could get a better Danish. If they could replace, I mean, ideally it would have been replace like I don't know how do you do this? Maybe instead of Yabby, you picked up Device and then you moved Cadian from an op to a rifle role. I think that would have been cool, but they didn't do that. I obviously think that would have been a sick thing to do. That would have been so fucking good. It probably would have put this team much higher than they are now, but whatever. Things happen. So Heroic would be the next team on my list. I'm not putting Furia or Fnatic. I think Furia and Fnatic just didn't really convince me in the last stage that they are really that good of a team or that good of teams. Fnatic had some pretty bad series. Furia looked super shaky, and unfortunately, some of these other teams at this point are just too good. Furia just seems to get worse and worse, and I don't believe in Art anymore as an in-game leader. I don't think they're using Safe properly. They don't seem to create opportunities for him. It's more so just like he has an op on the map, and it's just like if he gets kills, he gets kills, you know. But it's like he kind of just has to do it on his own. He can't like he doesn't get supported by the team in the same way that other oppers do, which I think is a fucking waste of his talent, frankly. Um, I don't feel confident putting those teams into one of these last few spots. I think Spirit is a better team, quite frankly, than these two teams at this point. And I know that's a big gamble. I'm not putting Ents in because although I do really, really love Valde and I actually really like their roster in general, I just their lack of firepower at times is concerning. Valde hasn't necessarily been like a takeover player. He can't replace Spinks, and he hasn't been anywhere close to it so far. And I just don't feel very confident. I think their variance is too high. I think Spirit at the very least. You can, for the most part, count on some of their you can count on Patsy doing his thing. I feel like for the most part, and Wonderful has looked good, right? And Magic's, yeah, I don't know. I just think the firepower, they just have better firepower than Ents, and they have an easier matchup. So I think this is what I'm going to pick, guys. I think I'm going to pick Spirit as my 3-0. I'm going to pick BNE as my 0-3. So that will either be correct, or at least on the track of being correct, or incredibly wrong within the first round because they're playing each other. And then I have FaZe as my favorite to make it through, Navi is second favorite, Vitality, then Cloud9, then Liquid, then Outsiders, and then NIP. So that is what I'm going to settle on. I hope you guys noticed I did end up moving my camera. I know I'm just mentioning this now, but I did move my camera because I just realized in the last video that where my camera was positioned, you couldn't actually see like where FaZe Clan was, which is where I had Vitality in the last stage. Um, you couldn't actually see that that's what I had picked. Um, so I apologize. I didn't realize that until afterward. But yeah, overall, looking forward to the games. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to watch as many of them as I would have liked because of that exam on Tuesday. Um, so kind of sucks. But I am going to try to watch as much as I can. It's just I can't promise that it's going to be that much. But I'm super excited. This is where the major begins, guys. Look at these fucking teams. This is incredible. Like these teams are good. These teams are good. If let me just say this. If these fucking 8 teams make it to the playoffs, I'm hyped. Like that would be such a fucking sick bracket. Um, obviously it's probably not going to happen. When does it ever? Because the format is so shit, you're always bound to have upsets. You're always bound to have some team that you never expected to make it to the quarterfinal and inevitably probably lose. Um, you know, it happens. You're going to see a big team. You're probably going to see one of these big names get upset. Could be a Cloud9, could be a Liquid, could be a Vitality. I think those are the 3 teams that could get upset in this stage. If outsiders don't make it, it's not really an upset. It's just kind of like damn, they just weren't, they just couldn't get over the hump. NIP, they're a super young roster. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But really, the teams that everyone thinks are just 100% locks are FaZe Clan, Navi, Vitality, Cloud9, and Team Liquid. And I think of those teams, the teams that could falter, mostly Cloud9 and Liquid. But I think you could add Vitality to that list to some degree. I still think Vitality is going to be fine, but if they do the same thing where they go down 0-2, I don't know that they're going to be they won't be as lucky that they can play some easier opponents in those 0-2 matchups because these teams are no joke to some degree. They're better than the previous stage. You're gonna have to do better than going 0-2. If one of these teams, if Liquid, Cloud9, or Vitality goes 0-2, you are putting yourself in a really, really, really bad position. Um, so hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully the teams that should make it will make it because I'm not one of those people who wants fucking Mouse and Sprout to be in the quarterfinal. Um, I would personally like to see the best teams make it to the playoffs because I want to see the best teams play in every match because I want the best games. I want to see the best teams in the world in front of a massive Rio crowd competing for the championship. That's what I want. I don't give a fuck about, I don't think Mouse is frankly a good enough team to be playing in a quarterfinal. So I hope it doesn't happen. That sounds terrible, but I want the best teams in the playoffs. And with this major format, it's very difficult. That usually doesn't happen. So I pray that it does. And yeah, we will see how it goes. Thank you all for watching. What do you think about my pick'ems? How are you guys doing in the pick'ems so far? What do you think I did right? What do you think I did wrong? I saw a comment on my last video that I was reading. It was about Gamer Legion and Mouse and all that, and they're right on Mouse. I did not get Mouse. I probably should have. I just didn't. I picked Big, which is I know probably not the best option, but I did it anyway. And then Gamer Legion, which looked good at first, and they had that tough matchup, the tough draw at the end, right? Um, brutal, brutal, but hey, it happens. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. I like reading them. I think they're interesting. Give me your opinions. I want to hear them. And let me know what you think of my opinions on who I think is going to make playoffs, and how well you guys have been doing in the pick'em so far. And like I said, I will be making a video for all of you who watch the Bleed Blue podcast. I will make an episode this weekend. I will try to. Um, like I said, I have a big exam coming up, so I'm gonna try my best. But it probably won't be as detailed as I'd like it to be. Um, because of the exam. So, unfortunately. But yeah, thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you guys next time.